Now, a Valley therapist accused of having sex with one of his clients. It's a story that is drawing a lot of attention tonight, and we are digging into the facts on this.
Team 12's Ryan Cody is working on that story, and he is live in the Alert Center with a look at what we have confirmed so far.
Well, we know Joseph Whitwell is agreeing to surrender his license to a state board instead of holding a formal hearing. It doesn't mean Whitwell is admitting guilt, but it does mean he's acknowledging the board has sufficient evidence he violated Arizona law by having a relationship with a former patient. The statute in question prohibits any licensed member of the behavioral health field to have sex with a current or former patient. Whitwell's social media pages say he was an employee at the Meadows Outpatient Center, which is a world-renowned sex addiction therapy facility in Scottsdale, the same facility treating Harvey Weinstein and Kevin Spacey. It's not clear if Whitwell was a sex addiction therapist himself, but having a sexual relationship with any current or former patient is against the law, leaving him subject to discipline from the board. Whitwell is not admitting he had sex with the patient, but the patient does admit to having consensual sex with Whitwell, and the board received 2 separate complaints about the issue. Those are the facts as we know them so far. We'll continue to work and find out more. We're in the Live Alert Center. Ryan Cody, 12 News.
All right, thanks for the update.